Hello everybody, I wanted to talk a bit about autism discrimination because it happens all the time, but it happens in a way that isn't as blatant or as obvious as other types of discrimination. Obviously, there's the more blatant examples, like someone saying that you're a degenerate because you're autistic, the same type of people who hate blacks, gays, etc., just complete and utter extremist scumbags on the internet. So that's like the first set of discrimination, which is pretty obvious, everybody sees it, everybody disavows it. But then there's a more subtle type of discrimination, which doesn't make me as angry, but makes me sad because it comes from a place of misunderstanding. What autism actually is and the effects autism has on one's psyche is not very well known to the typical person. And since most autistic people are socially inept for the age they are, because it's much harder for us to learn social skills, although we can do it, it just takes longer, a lot of people just see autism as a developmental delay. Like if I'm talking to an autistic 16-year-old, they're gonna have the mind of a 13-year-old, which isn't necessarily the case. They might have the social skills of a 13-year-old, but typically their brain is 16 years old or actually smarter. So when people use our social skill level to infer how smart overall we are, it creates some very discriminatory situations. For example, you may be at a restaurant with your family, and typically if the family has like an 8-year-old or something, the waiter will kneel down and be like, "What would you like to eat, honey?" and talk in a different way because they are a child. But when they do that to a 16-year-old autistic person just because they found out that they were autistic, it can come off as very, very offensive, even though they don't necessarily mean to be offensive. And this type of unintentional discrimination can also transition into other types of discussion. Like when I see people online debating the word retard and preaching to the choir that we shouldn't call people retards because it's very offensive to autistic people or people with other types of mental issues. But through that, they usually are talking for us, because believe it or not, there are a lot of autistic people like myself who don't see retard as a slur. We see it as a word similar to silly or goofy or idiot or stupid, just another way to insult people, but not necessarily offensive enough to be considered a slur on the same level as like the N-word or the F-word. But then when you explain that to those people as an autistic person, the reply you often get is something along the lines of, "Oh, well, I know you better. I've studied autism. I know. I've talked to autistic people. I am in the field, etc." And it just feels weird to have neurotypical people be the main vocal piece for autism advocacy. Like, we can think for ourselves. Imagine if Martin Luther King was a white guy preaching for black people. Yes, he may have all these studies in like black history and stuff and know what he's talking about, but it would feel weird that you have someone of a separate group advocating for your group. I mean, it's a nice gesture, it definitely comes from a kind place, but it comes across as if we can't speak for ourselves, and then to be shut down by people because I'm not a professional is just insulting. Yes, you studied it and you know a lot of the logistics of it, more than most people would, but I lived through it. And also the education of autism out there is not the most accurate at the moment. It's pretty insulting to be psychoanalyzed like that. Although people mean well, I do feel like there is a lot of unintentional discrimination with autism due to the lack of knowledge of actually what it is. And to boil it down for you guys, an autistic person is someone who just needs to learn social skills in a more manual way. Like for example, you don't know how to program off the bat, and you won't just learn how to program by watching someone. You could, but it would be much more effective to actually be taught how to program in a class. Same way for social skills. We have to learn either through trial and error or looking up how to be social or having people teach us. It's not going to come naturally. But just because it doesn't come naturally doesn't mean we don't have the desire to be social, doesn't mean we don't have emotions. It just means we learn in a different way, and since the world isn't built for autistic people, it takes a lot longer for us to become socially on par with our peers than people who have the advantage of living in a world that is geared towards neurotypical people. We aren't stupid, we just learn in a different way. And just because we might be socially unintelligent at times doesn't mean we are unintelligent overall. We might be even more intelligent than you in other categories. Having autism is very much a double-edged sword, and learning social skills is the equivalent of dulling down one side of the blade. You start out with a disadvantage, but once you fix it, you might actually have an advantage over other people. But I will talk about that in another video. So if you don't want to miss that, be sure to subscribe with notifications on. If you learned something from this video, be sure to tell me in the comment section below and leave a like, because I am new to this and I would love some feedback. But with all that being said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.